when people think about like law, they may not necessarily think about military law. What's the difference?
Well, we are, obviously the goal of the military is to fight wars. But we fight wars under the rule of law. So the job of the lawyer, they have a lot of different positions, but one of the jobs and the thing that I did most was operational law. We ensure that when we go to war, that we fight under the law of war in conformity with international law. So yeah, it's the right thing to do to win the war, but you got to do it in the right way. So a right thing has to be done in the right way. So just because we're going to war doesn't mean we can, target civilians, blow up cities, just indiscriminately do things.
Okay, well then that makes you the perfect person to talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is some of the appointments that we've seen just last night under the Trump administration. What do you think about just some of those? And if it's too broad, I can narrow it down. We've got the recent Attorney General announcement, the Secretary of Defense, the National Secretary, the Homeland Security. What do you think of those?
Well, again, I guess the premise is the president has said he's going to fundamentally, change things, and every politician, when they go into office, they talk about change, but few of them actually do any change. So President Trump won an overwhelming landslide, in my opinion. I think most reasonable people can look at the Electoral College, 312, that's huge, won the popular vote. So he's got a mandate from the people to do what he said he was going to do. So what he's doing right now is really evidence that he is actually implementing the ideas that he has put out on the campaign, that he wants to fundamentally reverse a lot of the things that we saw during the Biden administration. And one of those is the Department of Defense. We have horrible recruiting problems right now. Under the Biden administration, we cannot retain warfighters. And if you don't have warfighters, you cannot win a war. And part of that reason is that they've shifted away from the traditional training mission, to train in your weapons and your skills. So when you go to war, now we've got 20% of your training time is diversity, DEI, I think the term is woke issues. So I think the most surprising pick to me was Pete Hegseth for the Secretary of Defense. That's a huge organization. I mean, without one of the things that every nation needs is a vibrant, strong military, because without that, everything else flows from that. And this individual, is a Fox News host, does a great job there, but his experience in the military, he's been to Afghanistan, been to Iraq, he's a decorated combat veteran as an enlisted man, but that's way outside the norm. Usually the Secretary of Defense is a 3-star, 4-star general that's been at all the levels of command. They've worked their way up from the bottom all the way to the top. They know the Department of Defense, they know the structure and the ethos of the military. So, as much as Pete Hegseth is a fine American, a great individual, a great veteran, I think a lot of people question whether this is over his head. It's like, if you could drive a Ford pickup truck, great. Here's the keys to an 18-wheeler. Okay, it's a little different story. However, President Trump has picked this individual for a reason, and I think primarily that reason is his emphasis on getting the military back to doing what it traditionally has done, getting away from the concept of CRT, diversity training, and all these types of issues, and getting them back to the basic structure of the military. And a lot of people will say, and I think Pete said to himself, diversity is not a strength when it comes to the military. It's commonality. It's one team, one fight. It's not 40 teams, one fight. So when you go to boot camp, everybody gets their hair shaved. Everybody wears the same uniform. We don't care if you're black, white, green, yellow, heterosexual, homosexual, adulterer, or a family man. Doesn't matter. The only thing we're concentrating on is, here is your job. Can you do that job? And that's important, because if you don't have that and you emphasize diversity, as the Biden administration has done, the military kind of falls apart. And so you only got so many hours in the day to do the training. So do I want to spend time training my soldiers how to shoot their weapons, how to do their job, or learning about some issue of sociology and how this is that and the other thing, or whatever it is? No. Maybe in a different context, in a different workforce, that's fine, but not in the military. Because if we lose a war, the country collapses. And right now we're seeing, and we have seen, this is empirically true, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they can't meet their career goals because it's a voluntary force. Many people perceive the military as a place where they're going to be indoctrinated with concepts that they don't believe in. They didn't come in the military to get indoctrinated into, 15 different types of genders or whatever it is, or get indoctrinated about how Christian concepts are wrong or, reimagine American history. No, they came in because they're patriotic people, want to defend the country. That's all they want to do. So what you do in your off time is fine, but that's what they want to do. And that's what President Trump wants to reestablish. I think that's why he picked Pete Hegseth. I mean, he wrote a book recently on the war on warriors, and he describes all these things, how they're detrimental to the military. I happen to agree with that, having been in the military for 20 years. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you're an adulterer or if you're a family man, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care what your preferences are for this, that, and the other thing, what your religious beliefs are, don't care. I don't need classes on that stuff. I care, have you got my back and have I got your back, and let's train to do the mission. Jump out of the airplane, shoot the weapons, do what we got to do. And I think that's what President Trump wants to reinstill, is the esprit de corps. Esprit de corps is critical because we're calling on people to die for their country. This is not a game. And esprit de corps means I've got to be assured that the command is watching out for my best interests, that we're all in this together. We don't want to emphasize diversity. We want to emphasize green. As we used to say when I was in the military, we all bleed green. We all wear green. We don't look at people in the way that people do in the civilian world. We just don't. We're one family, one team, and when you get away from that, people don't join. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that right now because the people that actually do the fighting are generally people that are hardcore, traditional values, family values, patriotic conservatives. So when they see that the military is pushing ideas from the left fringe of ideology, they're not going to join. Yeah. And we can't have that. So I'm not saying that those ideologies are good, bad, or indifferent. You do you. That's fine. I'm a liberal. You do whatever you want to do. But in the military, this is not a game. This is deadly serious, and we need to have one team, one fight mentality. So I think in that idea, Pete Hegseth is a good choice because he brings that back, and that's what he's determined to do, in my opinion. I think he'll gain the experience, hopefully. I think he'll get surrounded by people that have experience in these issues to do the other issues. But if you look at the team we've had the last 4 years, they gave us Afghanistan. The Secretary of Defense under Afghanistan, no responsibility, no accountability, no one's ever fired. We were driven out of the country, lost 13 soldiers, billions of dollars of equipment gone, no accountability. Mm-hmm. So that choice, I can look at it both ways. And the other choice, of course, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is actually the head of the Justice for Warriors caucus in Congress. So he has a lot of experience also with military issues. But again, many people regard him as a maverick. He's outside the mainstream. A lot of these people are outside the mainstream that President Trump picked. But should we be surprised? I mean, President Trump is not exactly a mainstream political candidate. He never has been. He's outside the mainstream. So I don't think anybody should really be surprised when names come up and you go, wow, that's really out there. Well, yeah. So he wants to instill values that were traditional, make America great again is a slogan, and get rid of the values that this administration, the previous administration, the Obama administration, the Biden administration, they found that these things were valuable things. They ordered the military to instill these concepts. He wants to undo them. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he wants to secure the border. So his pick for Tom Homan, I know Tom, he's going to accomplish that mission. If that's your goal, that's the person to do it. And so some of the other picks, of course, again, when you kind of peel back the onion, you've got to say, if there are members that the Senate has to confirm, okay, if you're a senator, would you confirm that person? Because you got to look at the whole person. So Pete Hegseth, there might be some senators that might say, yes, you've got the right idea about reinstalling military values and not looking at the diversity stuff, but do you really have the skills to do the other part of the job? And they might vote against him. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I tend to think that with the overwhelming, opinion from the American people, you got 53 members of the Senate flipped. And so I think they're going to give President Trump exactly what he wants. things change. One thing about President Trump, if you're not doing the job, you're fired. He'll put somebody else in there. He's not going to hold on to somebody that is not competent, efficient, intelligent, doing the job. He will rotate people.
Yeah.
So again, we're in new times. This is, I'm not a politician, but I do see that he's acting in a very non-political fashion. He's not worried about politics and, I got to appease this person or do that. He's doing what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. And his instincts have got him where he is right now.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, how these are less than traditional picks,
yes.
not cookie cutter, so to speak. Do you see or foresee any issues that these picks might have when it comes to confirmation time?
Yeah, again, so the Senate has to confirm these picks. If the Democrat Party controlled the Senate, many of them would not be confirmed. But the Republicans control the Senate. And many of the Republicans owe their election or re-election to the influence of Donald Trump showing up at their rallies and helping them. So my sense is that they will all be confirmed. And again, if I was a senator there, I would also want to explore experience. I understand certain of these people, have the right drive and they line up with the way you're thinking, because if I'm the president, I'm going to put people in there that think like I think. But the experience issue is a different matter. Does Kristi Noem really have the experience to be the Department of Homeland Security Secretary? That's a huge responsibility. So she's been the governor of South Dakota, which a governorship gives you some experience. But I think that's a question many people are going to look at. What's your other experiences that would lead us to believe you could handle this job? That's not an easy job. You've got dozens of federal departments that are under the Department of Homeland Security. That's a huge responsibility. But again, many leaders, they're not down there rolling up their sleeves and doing the day-to-day work. They set the tone and the tenor for how they want things to be done. They hire smart people around them to assist them. So when you say, well, they don't have the skills to do it, yeah, they got the right attitude, and so that's a consideration you got to look at. But the bottom line is, I think that's one thing people are concerned with, is what's your life experience? Have you paid your dues? Do you really know how these organizations work? Mm-hmm. In some cases, the answer is no, they probably don't. But can they learn? Well, that's another question.
Bouncing off of experience, in your experience, what is the making of a good cabinet, and do these appointments have that potential to serve in that capacity?
Yeah, I think a good cabinet, you've got to, obviously the cabinet serves the president. So if I'm the president, I'm going to pick people that are within the bounds of my political philosophy. And he has a political philosophy. Everybody knows what it is. The American people voted for it. For the first time since the 80s, a Republican has won the majority of the actual vote in this country. That's phenomenal. So people can't argue, well, he doesn't have a mandate. Yeah, he kind of does. So I think it's only natural that he's going to pick people that think like he thinks. But there's a danger to that as well, because if you get yes people around you all the time, and this happens in Washington, I served 3 years in the Pentagon, all you hear is yes, 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 yes. You got to have some no voices out there that kind of sharpen you and say, well, maybe look at it this way or that way. So I don't think all these people are exactly lining up with the Trump ideology. I think some of them, as we know, his own vice president was very critical of President Trump at one time. I mean, he was anti-Trump, mm-hmm. and he was a no voice. So, but President Trump has I think the wisdom to say, oh, I understand that, but now I'm going to pick you as my vice president, even though you criticize me. Many politicians would never do that. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't pick somebody that had criticized them in the past. So there's a lot of issues, as we can see as the American people, that you look at this, you look at that, it raises a lot of questions, as you've indicated. There's a lot of questions that you look at the choices and how this cabinet is developing, but the bottom line is, he's the president. He picks the cabinet, and as to your question, yeah, I think they'll all eventually get confirmed by the Senate, because the Republican Party controls the Senate, and it's not even close.
Mm-hmm. So far we've talked about President Trump needing someone who is kind of going to think as he thinks, but outside of that, what do you think will determine success for some of these appointees?
Well, success is going to be whether the candidate, soon to be president, keeps his word. Many politicians will tell you all sorts of things when they're running for office. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. If you're a student of history, you look back at their presidency, you look at their promises, and you say, well, you didn't do this, this, and this, and you did half of that. One thing about President Trump, like him or not, we have a record to look at from the last 4 years when he ran. I'm going to put the Capitol, the embassy in Jerusalem. Every politician, Democrat and Republican, have been saying that for decades. They never did it. Trump did it. I'm going to do all I can to build a wall. Now, he had, for the first 2 years, he had a Republican majority, but they were opposing what he was trying to do. In the last 2 years, he had Democrats in the House and the Senate. Very hard to get the expenditures, the funding to do it. But he did a Herculean job on securing the border. I want to do it. He did it. Stay with Mexico. He actually was doing things he said he was going to do. I'm going to lower your taxes. He did that. So I think a lot of them, the American people, they don't like his rhetoric. And just full disclosure, I don't like all his rhetoric. I always tell people, listen to him with your eyes and not with your ears. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? Are you going to lower the taxes as you pledged as a candidate? I believe he will. And why do I do that? Because I look at when he was in office last time, he did it. So more than any other president in modern times, whether you like what he says or not, he's done it. And I think this time, he's doubling down. I'm going to do all the things I promised on the campaign trail. And again, people that voted for him, I imagine they voted for him because they liked the things he said. And they said, okay, we believed you, now produce. So he's producing people to put in the positions of power that will do what he wants them to do, which is only logical. Mm-hmm. So it's a free country, we can scratch our heads and go, really? That person? And that's okay. But ultimately, we're not the president. We elected this individual to be the president, so I always tell people, whatever ideology you believe in, it is now your president. So whether I vote for you or not, you're my president. President Biden, President Obama, I don't care. You're my president. So I think we all need to have that attitude. But yeah, it's an interesting, very interesting time because he's moving quickly. Very quickly, and he's pointing people that he wants to fulfill his promises on the campaign trail. Mm-hmm.
So talking about those head-scratching moments, we've seen a lot of that on social media. People are questioning some of these appointments. Is there anyone that you just straight up feel is not qualified and might not be the best choice for this country?
Again, I don't have all the facts. So a lot of people love to give their opinions. And I say, well, who are you? Do you know these people personally? No. I read one of their books, or I'm a political partisan. Okay, but do you know them? I don't know. I've talked to people that know Pete Hegseth. I've met Tom Homan, so I'm on the margins of knowing a couple. I know Matt Gaetz. I've met him, so I'm on the margin of knowing some of these people. But I'm very slow to give opinions unless I have all the facts. As a law professor, I always tell my students, just don't rush in. You get the facts and then develop something. So I don't have anybody that I'm vehemently opposed to because I have some head scratchers. But again, I understand the president's thinking on this, but I can understand the other view too. And the other view, most of it, if you're reasonable, I think the reasonable complaint is not that I'm a Democrat and they're Republicans. That's not reasonable. Reasonable is, do they have the experience? So with Pete Hegseth, I don't see the experience to be in that position, just from his life experience in the military. But I see the other qualities that the president sees in him, and so we'll see how it works out. I've seen people in other administrations that I've shook my head and scratched my head too, and they didn't turn out too well. Some of them did, some of them didn't.
And wrapping up here, one of my gold star questions, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but just impacting the armed forces, do you believe that Mr. Hegseth will be one of the better options to kind of improve what the military is and what they do?
I believe he will. Back to the premise. The job of the military is to go to war. That's the most serious thing you can do in life. And the people that do that have to be dedicated we don't want diversity. We want commonality. It's always been that way. When I went to boot camp, they didn't say, okay, well, all the people of this way over here and this people over here, we're going to treat you differently. No. You would go in, and when they cut your hair, the barber would say, do you want to save that mustache? And then you would say yes. He'd shave it off and put it in an envelope for you. There is no diversity. We don't emphasize diversity. We don't want diversity because it makes a weak force. We want the best people, regardless of your sexual orientation, the color of your skin, your religious belief. We don't care about that stuff, and we just want to know: are you with us? Are we a team? Are we going to do this? It's a brotherhood. It's a sisterhood, and this idea of diversity has broken that apart, and that's why the recruiting levels have gone down, because people that are of a mind where you're criticizing their core beliefs, maybe about the Bible and the way the Bible defines marriage, and now I'm told that's evil. Well, I'm not going to join. Let's just not talk about it. You have your religious beliefs, let somebody else have theirs. We're not there to study the Bible. We're there to kill the enemy. So when you start getting all these tangent issues about, oh, your beliefs are wrong and this is the way you should look at life, that has nothing to do with warfighters. And the more you emphasize that, the more you drive out a whole bunch of people, because they're just saying, I'm not joining. And if that gets to a point where we actually have a World War III, we'll be defeated. And you won't be sipping your lattes anymore at Starbucks. This is serious business. We need commonality. So for that, I would probably vote for Pete Hegseth, although I have grave questions about his life experience to run the Department of Defense in other areas. So I would offset that with, let's get experienced retired generals to help you, Pete, do these other things. But the military right now, we are in danger. The red lights are flashing. What's the evidence? The recruiting standards. Conservatives are not joining. And we can't have that. We need conservatives, liberals, leftists, rightists, whatever, Tao, Buddhists, Confucians, Christians. Let's all come in, and let's not talk about these diverse issues, because that's your personal stuff. As an American, you can be as diverse as you want, but when you join the military, you belong to Uncle Sam now.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you might want to say or add that maybe I haven't asked you, just talking about this topic in particular?
Well, I think the larger topic is, obviously we've had a very divisive election. And a lot of people are happy, a lot of people are unhappy. And that was the same process we had 4 years ago. A lot of people are happy, a lot of people are not happy. I'm for unity. We should be, because that's my military background. We're all in the same family. We're all Americans. And in my family, we've got some people that, over here, but you're still my family. I'm going to die for you. I'm going to fight for you. We're all family. So we can disagree, but let's not go overboard. We're all family. We're Americans. We have that in common. Let's concentrate on the commonalities. Celebrate the differences. I got differences. You got differences. I'm not going to impose my differences on you. Please don't do it to me. Have a nice day. That's what America's all about. That's the stuff of freedom that we drink from. We got to remember that we're all family.